With trans women banned last week from elite female cycling competitions, the gender debate continues to be a polarising topic in today's society.
Yes, the question of what is a woman will be explored in a new documentary, Gender Wars, airing this week, that delves into the meaning of sex and gender. Let's take a look.
In the 70s and the 80s, I mean, we were the dirt that people wiped off their shoes. The 90s was when we organised and we created Press for Change. Whatever we got, we'd had to fight for through the courts. We were given absolutely nothing for free. We did everything that was needed to try and get people to understand that we were just like them.
We're joined now by one of those featured in the documentary, Professor Kathleen Stock, who resigned from her role as a university lecturer after being targeted by activists over her views on gender identity. Kevin and Cindy are also still with us. So the documentary is tomorrow night. You're also going to be speaking in Oxford tomorrow. We know there's going to be demonstrations outside. We've just heard about a letter from academics and staff members criticising what you are going to be saying, maybe even you being allowed to say it. What is it about what you're going to say tomorrow which provokes this kind of reaction, and why do you think it's happening?
Well, they don't know what I'm going to say tomorrow because it's an interview, so I haven't got a speech prepared. And I guarantee that most of the people protesting against me have not read my book or listened to anything I've said. So really, this is just a kind of controversy generated out a lot of sort of fantasizing about what the other side thinks, I think. So part of the point of the documentary is to take a calmer, more in-depth look at the two sides of the dispute and hopefully get people to understand what it's actually about.
Were you surprised by the reaction you've had? You know, does it make you feel like you don't want to speak out in the way that you have been because of the reaction?
No, I am committed to talking about it because we have to, because as far as I'm concerned, these issues are really important and there's more people affected than just a small group of trans people, because the policies that are being argued for and the laws are very wide-ranging and very radical and change all sorts of things about British society, including women-only spaces, women's sports and all the rest of it. So we have to keep talking about it. It is really unfortunate that the only way that you can talk about it is in this sort of really hostile environment, it seems.
Do you think it's possible to find, common ground, a middle ground? Because, you will say that the people who will protest against you are being extreme and they're polarising the debate, and you've experienced a huge amount of kind of abuse, and that is a terrible thing. But there'll be people on the other side of the debate who will say, but you're also extreme and you're taking the other side, and that is also not where the centre ground is. And I wonder, is there some truth in that? Do you think both sides have been ending up fighting from the extremes, leaving lots of people in the middle thinking, where is the common ground?
I mean, there is extremes in every argument, that you'll find people on the edges of it. But I don't think that's what's going on here, quite honestly. I think that if people actually engage with, for instance, the things that I've been saying, I'm trying to find solutions, and I'm actually a moderate, I'm afraid. I know that the other side doesn't want to think of me as a moderate, but actually I am. So I'm very, very clear about trans people being protected in law. I have no ambition to argue against the Equality Act or the Gender Recognition Act, so actually I think this is probably as good as it gets. And the trouble is that the extremes on the other side, who do not represent ordinary trans people, they have never, it's not democratic, they haven't done a vote. There's a few voices really dominating that side who are asking for extreme measures, as far as I'm concerned.
But just to ask you a kind of particular question then, because, clearly we were reporting that in sport now, it's been decided that women who aren't sexually a woman shouldn't be able to compete that slightly provokes my question. Those women, those people will not be able to compete in a swimming race if they are trans and have transitioned. And clearly it's important to have protections around safe spaces. You referred to that earlier. But is it not possible, in your view, for somebody who was a man to become, as they would describe it, a woman?
No, you can't change sex. It's not biologically possible.
No, but I didn't ask you about sex. I asked you about whether they can become a woman.
Womanhood, I would say, is entirely sensibly predicated on sex. There's no other good way of doing it.
And there are lots of people who say that's an extreme view.
If you let me explain my reasoning.
But there are lots of people who say that's an extreme view.
Well, of course they do, but if you will let me explain my reasoning, biology is the thing that affects our bodily performance in sport, that affects our chances of being sexually assaulted, that affects medical treatment.
All of that. I'm conceding all of that.
Well, then, so what's the word for that? Adult, human, female, woman, I'm afraid.
So if a trans person who transitions and legally becomes a woman, wants to be described as a woman.
I'll describe them as a woman for certain limited purposes, but there's got to be limits because obviously for all the domains we've just talked about, it matters.
So the thing I feel is that there's two extremes having this big fight. And actually most people in the centre ground think, well, of course that person's not sexually a woman, but actually they can become legally a woman, and they are a woman.
They can.
And why do you want to tell vulnerable young 21-year-olds that they can't be a woman because you've decided they're not allowed to be one?
Well, I didn't decide it. I mean, we're animals. We're based in nature. The world decided it. The way evolution decided it. I mean, it's crazy to think that just because I'm making some category distinctions that have been around for centuries and in every natural language exists, that I'm deciding who gets to be a woman. I'm not. I'm describing the world I see. And we have evolved to make differentiations between males and females in the human species, and they're very useful distinctions. The whole future of sexual reproduction depends on us recognising males and women.
But you're saying to somebody who transitions that they're not a woman?
I don't go up to them and say that.
But you are saying that?
I'm happy to... If in general I am, because
do you understand that is the thing which makes people feel as though the debate's polarised?
I understand that, but I also
understand
some people say
anybody can be a woman, and other people say they can't be a woman, and actually most people in the middle think, well, actually...
Well, how do you know what most people in the middle think, Ed? Have you polled them?
Well, I mean, I think that I do know what most people think.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
and you think I'm wrong?
Well, I think if you look at the polling on this, it depends how you phrase the question. If you ask, can a woman have a penis, most people say no.
Yeah, but I agree with that.
Oh, okay. Right, so obviously you are more extreme than many.
No, I'm telling you it's complicated, and that in your attempt to simplify
it, you end up... I certainly think it's complicated. I wrote a whole book about it to try to go through every single argument, and I assure you that, and I'm also prepared to go along with preferred pronouns. I'm preferred to immerse myself in a fiction that someone has changed sex, but I don't think they actually have, and I think we need words to describe the differences between males and females because they matter socially across all sorts of domains.
Somebody who transitions and wants to be a woman, I think it's fine to call them a woman. I don't know why you don't want to allow them to make that choice.
I know, well, that's why we're arguing about this, isn't it? We have a difference of opinion.
But do you feel to a certain extent we are in a different world now? I know you talk about, this has evolved over however many years and this dates back to whenever, but we're in a different world now, aren't we, where actually situations are different. And you know that the views that you put out do cause a significant amount of upset. There are a number of, Ed talked about the 100 Oxford-based staff members who've signed this response letter. We know that, back in 2021, more than 600 philosophers from around the world were critical about what you had to say as well. Does that not make you think, do you know what, perhaps I need to modify the way, the language I'm using?
I mean,
when you know it's causing upset.
Well, what are we going to stop talking about things because they cause upset?
No, not necessarily stop talking
about
it.
It's a free society. We have to talk about the things that cause upset because they're precisely the points at which pressure groups and activists will try and steer the conversation in a particular direction. So we have to have freedom of speech. We have to be able to talk about this. Now, of course, I am causing upset, but I'm telling you that the position I'm fighting against causes a lot of upset. You've got male rapists in female prisons. That causes a lot of upset. You've got children transitioning, doing things to their bodies that they can't take back. That causes upset, and their parents are very upset about it. You've got huge numbers of women unable to talk about sex-based rights in their workplaces because they feel stifled. That causes upset. So there are two different sets of interests here, and we need to have a conversation without one side, my side in particular, being constantly told that I'm somehow evil and bigoted for even raising these questions, which are extremely socially important.
Okay, well, let's pick up here now with Kevin and with Cindy. I mean, there are such strong opinions on both sides, Kevin, aren't they? That it causes upset, whenever this is discussed, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's probably the most toxic, polarising debate in public life at the moment. And there are people on the extremes of both sides who I think just treated appallingly. And there is a debate to be had. There's no doubt. I'd much prefer it to be reasoned like this, and hopefully in Oxford you get a hearing tomorrow, you get difficult questions, people can go in the audience.
Of course.
They can boo you and catcall you if they like. They don't have to all just applaud you, but you need the debate, because it's getting on for 20 years. You can legally change your gender. But is there a better way of doing it? Because trans people feel very marginalised, dehumanised. Can you go forward? But because I don't want to be another bloke mansplaining and shouting at women, but I also see that biological sex matters, particularly in sport. And you can change your gender, but if you were born a man, you have all those physical advantages of being a man. It's why we have male and female sports, and we don't just have a single category. And then you can extend it to prisons, and we saw what happened in Scotland, where a rapist who could only rape in a way a man could said they were transitioning to be a woman and went into a women's prison, and all hell understandably let loose. And then there are issues around women's space. I mean, sorry, I feel I'm mansplaining when I shouldn't be right.
What do you
Cindy, Kathleen's right. The protection of safe spaces is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people in this space, away from all of the noise, which is, I think, what we're hearing, we're not necessarily hearing the most people are saying something, we're hearing the loudest people are saying something, is that when these rights are coming against each other, what about women's rights? What about trans rights? Let's find a kind of compromise somewhere, but it can't just be one way or the other. If women are saying we feel like our rights are being eroded by the current discourse, then women should be allowed to say that. And I think the problem with the extremists on the for lack of a better word, the pro-trans rights side, is that they are so often very ad hominem. Kathleen becomes a transphobe. She becomes evil. It's not what she says is evil or whatever it is. It becomes so quickly ad hominem rather than engaging with the argument. And I think that's a sign that you've kind of lost the argument, that you're going by noise rather than by the sheer force of your argument.
As somebody who's had abuse from both directions, you kind of think, hang on, surely there's a better way of discussing this and working it forward and ensuring that trans people aren't discriminated against. And you can see that in employment law, housing, health. That's all easy to address in one way, but then there is that issue of sport and I'm mansplaining again, aren't I? I'm sorry, but
Kathleen, good luck with the documentary tomorrow, and also personally, I hope you get a proper and respectful hearing tomorrow and the chance to say the things which are important to say. So
thanks very much.
I hope that happens. I fear it may not, but I hope it does.
Thank you. Kevin, Cindy, thanks very much to you as well. Now, still to come this morning.